What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 247 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today, I want to talk to you about another Mark Wheatley comic book. This is Mars by Wheatley and Mark Hempel. This is a 12-issue miniseries originally done by First Comics. This particular collection and printing was done by IDW. This is the story of Morgana, or Morgana, I don't know how it's pronounced in this book. When she is a young girl, like 13 or so, her back is broken in a terrorist attack on her father, and her father was a scientist. He died in the attack, and then she also becomes a scientist. She grows up and continues his research. She's extremely brilliant. When she's like 13, shortly after her back is broken, she gets a PhD. She's really smart. She advances a couple of different fields of science, and basically in trying to get to a point where she can walk again, even though she has a broken back, she goes out into outer space with several other different characters, because if she goes on the moon, then the gravity is less, and so it's easier for her to walk once she has this metal harness thing. And then while she's on the spaceship, some stuff goes down on the lunar colony and also on Earth, and so the crew has to go into suspended animation, and then when Morgana comes out of suspended animation, the crew is gone, and that is where the first issue ends. And this series is absolutely insane, and it is 100% impossible to predict where the series goes, and I mean all of that in the absolute best way possible. I can't tell you how frustrating it is whenever you are watching a movie or reading a book and you know where the plot is going. Sometimes that can be a comfort. Sometimes whenever I'm just deathly ill and I can't even get up off the couch, I just want to watch a movie that I've watched 1,000 times before because I know what happens, and that's comforting to me. But whenever you're reading something or watching something new, you don't want it to be predictable. You don't want to say, okay, this is exactly what's going to happen, and then watch that exact same thing happen. What I love about this book is that you have no idea what is going to happen next. It is so weird and so unique, and like I said, I mean that in the absolute best way possible. Trying to think of a way to describe this book, a way of saying, okay, it's kind of like this meets that, I couldn't even do it. There's a little bit of Alien there, the movie Alien by Ridley Scott, except that even that isn't really doing this book justice. Alien is a very cold, lifeless, bleak movie, while this is full of color and is very atmospheric. It's got all the stuff that you won't find in the movie Alien, and that's not disparaging the movie Alien. I like that movie quite a bit, but this really only has a few superficial things in common with the movie Alien. For example, when she's alone on the ship and no one else is there, there's a little bit of a mystery here. She doesn't know what's happened to the rest of the crew, and she has to go find them. It kind of reminds me of those scenes in Alien where Ripley is by herself on the ship, and it's her against the monster. It kind of reminds me of that, but also it goes in an entirely different direction. I really love how unpredictable this book is, and like I said, I mean that in the best way possible. Wheatley and Hempel both deliver a really amazing story in terms of writing and art. I talked a little bit about Mark Wheatley's art yesterday. I really love his art here. It's pretty similar to his art in Lone Justice. I was about to say Rough Justice, that's a different thing. I really like his art here. It is a little bit different because this miniseries came out in, I think, 1984, and Lone Justice came out in the 2000s, I believe. So his style has changed quite a bit in between Mars and Lone Justice, but you can still tell that it is the same guy. It's a lot more cartoony here than it was in Lone Justice, which I like that quite a bit. I'm a sucker for those cartoony styles. Michael Avon Oeming, really like his work. Darwin Cook, Bruce Timm, I like those guys. Michael Cho, they have a very cartoony style that appeals to my taste, and this is a lot more closer to those than it was in Lone Justice. That's not to say that the work in Lone Justice is worse. I feel like if Mark Wheatley is drifting in that direction, then he is more comfortable with that style, and if he likes that style more, and if that's what works for him, I wouldn't want him to stay in a particular artistic style that he doesn't feel like suits him as well as what he's doing now. But I do like this style, maybe a little bit more than what he was doing in Lone Justice, but that's not to say that the style there was any worse. One thing I really like about this book is the character of Morgana herself. I really love that after she has her accident where her spine is broken, she doesn't get too despondent. And that's going to sound a little bit harsh, but I really wasn't looking forward to reading an entire 12-issue miniseries of her completely complaining about having a broken back and how this has ruined her life and how she's never going to get to do anything that she wanted to do with her life because of her broken back. Now, if somebody has a broken back, it is understandable that they are going to feel a little down in the dumps about that. It's understandable that they are going to complain about that. I just didn't want to read a comic book that's this big that is exclusively about the main character complaining about this life-threatening change in their life. I didn't want that. And fortunately, this book doesn't do that. It also doesn't skirt away from the realism of her complaining about what's happened to her. This book is able to deal with that, but also do it in such a way where I'm not bogged down with all of her complaints about how she broke her back. This book does a very interesting thing in the passage of time, where when we first start off, she's 13, and then by the end of issue 1, I don't know how old she is. She might be 26, she might be 35. I'm not really sure, not counting the hypersleep where like 10,000 years has passed, but not counting that, we don't really know how old she is. But when we first start off the book, she's 13 or 14, and I like that there's one page where we see her having all of these depressing thoughts, where she's saying, I wish I had died, and in that panel, all of the grass and the trees are green, and then in the very next panel, she's thinking very similar thoughts, but then we see a brown leaf that's falling, and it's subtle, but you can see, okay, time is passing here, and then by the end of that page and going into the next page, she's already starting to conquer what's happened to her, and she's already starting to figure out a way to make this work not only for herself, but for other people by advancing these scientific theories and techniques. And I really love that this book is able to embrace what very realistically somebody would feel if they broke their back and it seemingly ruined their life, while it also doesn't spend the entire book with this character complaining about that and constantly reminding everyone, hey, remember that time I broke my back. By the time you get to the end of issue 1, she's not even talking about it anymore, and admittedly, that's because she has found a way to get around it so she can walk, but also, there is a reminder of that. She hasn't completely forgotten that she broke her back and that she went through this huge change in her life, and I really like that this book is able to acknowledge that, but also move past it in a way that I felt was very organic. I love that. That was probably my favorite part of this book, and that's saying something because there's a lot of really interesting, very, I don't want to say kooky, very colorful, energetic, quirky, I think quirky is a good word, things about this book. So those are my thoughts on Mars. There's still so much more that I could talk about with this book. You guys should check this out. Grab yourself a copy if you can find it. It is a really interesting science fiction book. One of the guys on the back of the book here said that this is just as good as any science fiction epic in prose that you will find. I think one of them said something very similar to that, and I definitely agree. But this is a very good book. I liked it. I hope that you guys will check it out, and if you like this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a different video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.